there, welcome to my channel. I've been away on vacation a bit and I've been wanting to do a video. So I went to the Dollar Tree and I was looking at stuff and this kind of inspired me. This is actually like a decor item and I did find one with an elephant as well. So my idea is to do sort of pop art chickens. So I'm planning to do like a repeating pattern of chickens in sort of pop art colors. To make it simple, I'm thinking I'm adding some different stencils that are more like geometric type stencils, just to add a bit of sort of that halftone type of feeling to it. And I'm going to stick with some sort of bright colors, flat colors, like nothing too metallic or shiny. And yeah, so I'm hoping this works. I'm going to do a couple test prints and then we'll get started. Just have to say I'm in the middle of testing and I think that looks really cool. I just wanted to show you because that's not going to stay like that. But in terms of like art decor, like home decor, you could just colorize the chicken part. Maybe not purple with the red, but you get the idea. So anyways, on to the testing. This is the Canson's mixed media paper, so it's a little bit thicker. And I'm using my 8x10 jelly plate. So I'm using this as a bit of mask just to make the area a little bit easier to work with. So I just traced the hexagon shape onto some cardstock and I cut it out using an X-Acto knife to make this template. I think this one might be interesting. I wish it was a bit wider. I think I'll have to go that way. I want sort of a dark tone for this. Let's use the purple. This is the Dioxazine purple. So it takes quite a bit of paint to get the openings filled, so I'm just bringing this on. And I'm going to take off the stencil, and first I try to use I'll just call it chicken stamp, the chicken stamp right away, and it doesn't really give me a good outline. So I tried again, but in the future I end up putting a second coat of paint, or sometimes I'll do 2 layers together. You'll see a little bit later. I'll fast forward through most of the prints. So once I have a completely full hexagon, that's when I'll use the chicken stamp to remove paint to give me an outline of where I'd add the color for the chicken. So you can see that's much easier to see the chicken now. So I wipe off some of the paint and I stamp it again while it's still wet to remove a little bit more of that color so that the next color I put on will show fully. And I let this dry before the next step. Let's add some pink. And the reason I'm using pan pastel instead of acrylic paint is I want to do the different sections. Quite a bright pink. And then I'm thinking yellow on the outside. But what I could do is maybe, I might do the pickup with yellow, but then I'm wondering if that's going to turn the blue to a green, which would be okay, I suppose. But I did want the blue. So while I put this in, I will think about it. We'll put this on fast forward for a bit. This part's a little tricky. I think if a bit goes over onto the blue, it's not going to show that much, but I'm trying to keep to the outline as much as possible. I'm showing techniques with pan pastels, and I know not everyone has pan pastels, but they are really fun to use on the jelly plate. And you don't have to get a whole bunch. You could just get the main, some primary colors, or some main colors like a bright red, magenta, blue, green, yellow, orange, and then you could buy a black and then a white to get different shades. I'm thinking orange or yellow. Let's do yellow. So this is the Dollarstore, which is more of a orangey yellow, and that's the Hansa. I'm going to use the Hansa yellow, the really bright construction color. And I've shown before that you can use makeup instead of pan pastels, and you can use chalks, like Stampin' Up! Had some old chalks, or some soft pastels that are in like a stick form as long as they're soft. And I actually found some reasonably priced makeup at the drugstore that I'm going to do a video comparing that to pan pastels and on the jelly plate and see if there's much difference. In addition, you know, other art supplies are available. I know Jane Davenport has sort of a pastel line that she has, so there's lots of different options. And because pan pastel is a dry medium, we're going to pick that up and I'm going to stamp it onto this base paper. So let's just use white for our pickup. There will be a bit of pan pastel left on this afterwards, which we can just clean off with some baby wipes. Not a problem. All right, so I'm trying to keep this pretty simple. Take off our mask and let's stamp that on. I'll put in the center. I'm going to be putting different stamps, so hopefully that's straight. So one of the things about pop art, some pop art is there's an element of repetition. So that's why I'm going to do just all chickens and repeat them in different colors and patterns, keeping with sort of geometric type of motifs. All right. I'm not an expert on pop art or art history, so this is just my interpretation of pop art. All right, let that dry and then we'll pull it and we'll do another chicken. Okay, let's see how it looks. All right. So I think that's interesting. All right, I'm going to put this aside so it doesn't get dirty. We could do ghost print of this. Yeah, that didn't pick up too much of that. Oh well, that's interesting background paper. Use some baby oil to reset this. Okay, so you just clean up with the baby oil to get the pan pastel remnants off there. So that's a basic technique I'm going to be doing all these mini chicken prints with and stamping them on that one piece of paper. I do make a secondary paper with some of the leftovers. I'll show that at the end. So I'm probably going to just speed up the rest of the video to show you each print, and I'll pop in every now and then if I'm doing something different and explain why I'm doing it that way. So I hope you just sit back, relax, enjoy the rest of this process. If you don't want to see each one, you can just zoom to the end and check out the finished product and my final thoughts. Here I'm just showing how you can use an acrylic paint pen to fill in specific areas. I'm using a Posca paint pen, and just be careful not to press too hard if it's a thinner point. Thicker points are probably a bit safer. The other thing to mention is it does take a little bit longer for the Posca paint to dry. And in this case, because I was thinking of picking it up with a green, I wanted to back that chicken with some white. I was afraid that the green would dull it down. However, I did a test afterwards and it didn't actually dull it down, so I could have skipped this step. In other colors though, I would recommend doing something like this. For example, if you're using like a lighter color, like a light yellow, orange, or a light pink, you might want to think about doing this. But pan pastels are generally pretty opaque, so I'm worried more about paint affecting other paint coming through. In this video, you'll see me using mostly white to do the pickups. This print, I liked it at the time, but as I went on, I found that it needed a bit more contrast. So I do add some dark green hexagons to that red chicken later. I could have put the stencil first and then put the paint in. Sometimes I do it that way, sometimes I don't. Here you did notice that I used the chicken stamp before the second layer of paint, and that does help the image or the pattern over the chicken be a little bit lighter. Sometimes I did that, sometimes I didn't, so you'll notice that it changes depending on my mood, I guess. I'm just talking about here how you could use the Posca pen to fill in the chicken there and you'd have to wait. However, you know, a pan of pan pastel isn't much more expensive than a Posca paint pen, like a single pen. So I feel like the pan pastels actually go further. So I reserve my Posca pens for smaller areas. So for the green, I kind of want in between these two. So you can actually blend these. You can get extra large soft sponges. You can blend them. Just blowing off the excess, or you could just shake it. Actually, I can see, looking through, and I hold it up, I can see I could go a little bit closer to the edge right there. And perhaps now's a good time to mention that when you pick up the pan pastel with the acrylic paint, you're virtually sealing that pan pastel to the paper. So a little bit of it might rub off if you put your finger over top of the print after, but it's really pretty stable. You can seal it with like a spray sealer if you want, just to make it a bit more stable. It really depends on what you're going to be using it for, I think. After I remove the stencil, I do let the red dots dry before I add this pink paint. You'll notice that I didn't off stamp the red dots with the chicken stamp, so in the final print, those red dots will be more prominent than they were, say, on the last chicken, which had the Charlie Brown stripes, I guess you'd call them. If you look carefully, you might notice the difference between the red dots, which weren't stamped off, and the blue dots, which were, and it really depends what look you're going for, the order that you do things. The openings on this stencil are very small. It's kind of like a matrix design. I don't know where the stencil is from, so instead of using a brayer, I actually just take a sponge and I really push the paint through there. And I wanted a purple, but a little bit lighter purple than the dioxazine, so I kind of mix it on my 5x7 plate on the side. And then we're stamping off as usual. And don't forget to let that paint dry before you try to add the pan pastel, otherwise you're going to wreck your soft tools, or if you're using makeup or whatever you're using. And in general, you know, you should let layers dry between when you're jelly plating, except with the pan pastel, once you put it on, it's already dry, so you can go ahead and do the pickup right away. And just a reminder, once you stamp it down, you have to let it dry fully before you try to pull the paper off. Oh, this was an interesting one. So that stencil, I don't know, is a generic stencil from the Amazon. And I used the magenta, and then I put the yellow, but the magenta had dried pretty well, so it's very prominent when I take that off. One of the things with pop art I noticed is they use a lot of colors that are opposite on the color wheel, and if you try to mix these, you'll often get mud, which is another reason why I'm using white paint to pick up most of these. And I'm trying to use different, not quite primary, like mostly primary colors, but some secondary colors too. I'm not a color theorist. I haven't, had, a specific formal art training. I just kind of go with what I like and what I've learned. And a lot of what I've learned has been through YouTube, so I'm sure some that are watching right now, I've learned from you quite a bit. So I appreciate anybody watching my channel, and I like to share, what I do. I do more than jelly printing, but it is fun to make videos about jelly printing, but I do make other tons of videos every now and then. And while it's important to remember to let your paint dry before you add the next layer, when you're using the stamp to remove paint, it needs to be wet, so you don't let that red layer dry, just as a little side note here. But then you have to wait and let it dry before you add the pan pastel. So I did spend a lot of time waiting for things to dry when I did this project, and it took me a good 2 days to do. And I think this little hexagon was my favorite chicken. I like the pink with the blue and then the red. Let me know in the comments below which chicken is your favorite. This stencil is a Patty Tolly Paris stencil. This design is by Joan Smithies, and Joan just designed a whole bunch of new stencils. You can check them out at istencils.com. And for this one, I put the orange, then I put the stencil down because I wanted the lines to be orange, but I wanted the main part to be magenta. So before pulling up the stencil, I brayered on the paint while the orange was still wet. It was a bit slippery, so you have to hold it. Then I lifted up the stencil before stamping off the chicken. And again, let it dry before adding the pan pastels. And I mixed my own green this time, and then I put the bright green over top. But really, whatever you put down first on the jelly plate is what's going to show in the print. So I don't know if adding the extra layer of brightness under really helped that much. But I did notice that the paint, the orange paint, had a lot of bubbles in it because I put the stencil over it. So I do go over the lines with the orange pan pastel because I really wanted that orange to pop out. And in a moment you'll see I'll turn it over and you'll see that it is quite solid now. So I'm happy with that. So the nice thing about having your gel plate on acrylic blocks like PM Artist Studio suggests is that you're able to turn it over and look underneath to see how things look, which is great, especially when you're a beginner. My plate is very yellow because I've used alcohol inks on it, so it's a bit harder to tell the colors, but you get the general idea. Here's where I'm adding the extra green to that one chicken print, and I don't leave that on very long. I don't wait for it to dry because I don't want all the paint to go off onto that section. So I lift it off before all the paint has adhered, and I'm happy with how that looks. Okay, we're more than halfway done. This next combo is a little tricky, the orange and purple. So I put the orange down, blot it off, and then I add the purple, well, more of like a light purple lavender through those openings, and it's very wet before I stamp that chicken off. And again, the paint kind of bubbled under the orange, under the stencil, so again I'll add some orange back with the pan pastel. So when I hold it up, you can really see where it's missing some color. So like I said, I just add some orange to the whole thing, and then we stamp it off. So I definitely want to keep this pink and green combo separate. They would definitely make mud together. So once again, I just left the stencil on to get those pink lines and blotted off the pink, then added the green without taking the stencil off and making sure I had enough paint so it would stay wet. And this one, now we're working more on the edges of the print, so we're not actually going to get the whole chicken imprint. and I felt like it was a bit see-through, so I added a light purple and then dark purple again to the chicken. And then I'm gonna bold up those pink lines using that pink Posca again, but just where I think it's gonna be on the final print. So I don't do the whole thing. I don't like wasting my Posca paint pens, and I just do the bottom half because that's what's gonna show. And remember to let that Posca dry fully before doing your final pull. I sound like a broken record. So as I'm filling the edges, rather than start from scratch, I decide to just alter the colors of the leftovers slightly to make just the little ledge, the little top edge of that chicken print on the bottom of the page. So I'm just, like I said, changing up the colors using different stencils, so you can't even tell it was from the same print. It's a next generation. This stencil is also a Stampin' Up stencil, and definitely not that red dry. Now when I was putting the blue craft paint on, it's a bit older and it started drying, so I mixed in some other, like a turquoise, to make it a bit thicker, and then I reapplied it before it was dry because I wanted the layers wet to do the pickup with the chicken stamp. Hopefully that makes sense. It sounds complicated. It sounds more complicated than it is. Just play and have fun and play with colors, and remember, let things dry, but don't let different steps dry. I guess it is complicated, but you could do it. You could do it. I know you can. So I wasn't totally happy with how bright that red was on that last print, so I decided to just use some paint to go over the chicken remnants and just stamp on top of the red just to push it back a bit, so you can see there's actually a chicken butt there. Oh, here I missed, I forgot to press record, so I used pan pastels with a PM Artist Studio stencil. It is there, and I used the pan pastels to put the pattern down first, and then I added the layer of the yellow craft paint and did the stampy with the chicken as per usual. So it seemed like a lot of work to get just a little corner of a chicken butt in there. So again, I reused the leftovers there, just change up the colors a bit to fill in one other section of the print. I didn't even really need to put that purple chicken there. It doesn't make it. I was tempted to like cut the thing down, and I thought, no, I'm not going to be lazy. I'm going to go all the way to the edge. So I think with the rest, I just paint in what's missing, and it's pretty straightforward. Just isolate the areas and then add some stencils to add some variety. Oh, that circular stencil, that's another PM Artist Studio stencil, and I use it in this spot as well, just changing up the color and the part of the stencil that I used. So working with all these colors, it was kind of like doing a puzzle. I'll show at the end my final thoughts how I kind of planned things, or I didn't plan it ahead of time. I kind of planned as I went, kind of like problem solving. What colors can I use where? I don't want same colors right up next to each other. It was kind of like doing a color puzzle that I had to solve and to try to make it look balanced, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Now I'm just using some Posca paint pens to fill in some areas that I missed. Here's the almost finished piece. The first few were pretty simple in terms of choosing colors, but as it went along, it got more complicated. So I ended up doing like little sort of templates of what would go where and what would work. And I tried to use a different stencil for each one. And I'm saying it's almost finished because I also had like a practice sheet and a, stamping off the extra sheet, which is this one. And it was very faint, so I outlined the chickens and the hexagons with the black. And I really like how that helps. So I'm gonna outline this. Could be a mistake. I took a picture of this just in case I didn't like the black but I'm going to go for it. So I'll just do that and I'll come back and show you the finished result. Here's the final page. It's quite large. It took 2 days for me to do this. I'm really happy with it. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. I had a lot of fun doing it. I mentioned that you can reuse this to make other prints, and what I did is after the first one, I let the first one set, and then each time I wiped it off so it wouldn't build up too much paint, but also because I liked how that looked. So if I wanted, I could, you know, paint the background a different color, maybe black or white. And then, you know, if you're into chickens, that could be, you know, a home decor item for you. So I'm going to just show a close-up video of the final print. Let me know which chicken's your favorite, and thank you so much for watching. Please like and share and all that YouTube-y stuff, and have a great day. Oh, sorry, my cord got in the picture there a little bit. Running out of battery. All right, bye everybody.